Yeah, I realized how fleeting youth was when I first heard like the word
The
doggo and
moment you
puppers
turn
and all
30.
that. I'm like, oh, this is the youth slang for dogs and all that. I'm like, oh, that's really cool. And then like a few years later, people are like, man, but boomers are so weird. They say words like doggo and puppers. It's like, it's so cringe. And I was like,
No, I love it.
ah,
There was a mashup of the reality show lady yelling at the cat,
uh-huh.
and it was mashed up with the two motorcycle, like the father and the son motorcycle guys yelling at each other, and one throws a chair, and
Yeah.
it was like Gen Z was was the biker's son, and he was yelling at the pointing lady, and it was like Gen Z pointing at the yelling lady and said, "Fuck off, boomer." And then
Mm-hmm.
the yelling lady Gen X yelling at the Gen Zer going, "Fucking millennial." And then
Mm-hmm.
the actual boomer was the cat just going like that. And then the millennial gets hit by a chair. Yeah.
I love it when like culture just all collapses in on itself. Like I feel like that's what I love about like meme culture and stuff. It's like a house of cards. It builds up and builds up, and then eventually, like one year, all the
It
memes
all,
come together, crash, and then nobody refers to them anymore.
yeah, they're
Yeah.
all old now. It's all
Well,
boomer
it's
material,
actually
boomer
on that
humor.
subject, wild as backdrop is
Mhm.
actually very appropriate because the cycle
Yeah.
of memehood ends at local news. When the local news
Ah,
Yeah.
on
that is
memes,
true.
the
Local
meme's over.
news. It's
Yeah,
just like when parents start getting into something, that's when the fad dies.
When their
exactly.
puff piece is like, tonight, are your kids on fleek? You're like, oh, yeah, it's dead.
Oh wow, Fleet died
Yeah.
quick.
Yeah. Yep, they got it. They found it. There's also another term they say, basically, whenever white people get a hold of popular slang, it's done. Like it's
Ah,
dead. All right. So, Wild, do you want to introduce us?
yep. Hello, ladies and gentlemen out there in Radio Land. This is those Muckrakers coming to you live once again through the power of the internet. I'm Pat,
I'm Pete.
I'm Bobby, and we're
and,
not live.
and we're not live.
I was gonna
This
say
is
like
episode 119.
I meant to say like speaking of white people getting a hold of stuff.
Yeah. We have gotten a hold of the concept of podcasting. It is dead now.
I feel like I don't know, man. It feels like everyone has a podcast, or at least had. I don't know how
So,
long everyone will have a podcast.
So that was
I,
like before I started doing this one, I had a friend who actually came to me, is a very good friend of mine, and he's just like, "Man, I really wish you'd start a podcast." And I was like, I really think the market for white guy gives his opinion on the internet is fairly oversaturated. I think I'm gonna
Yeah,
sit this one out, fam.
there's a,
Like,
yeah.
one of my
The,
favorite things that I heard one time was, how you have like a murder of crows, a conspiracy of ravens or whatever. What it's called when a bunch of white people get together is a podcast of white guys.
the only way we could be more just on point is if we were like tonight in true crime.
Yeah.
yeah. Or
And maybe you can
10
help
things
solve a mystery.
you didn't know.
The
Number 8 will amaze you.
the true crime market has gotten so bad. I listened to one like a year ago. I listened to it off and on. I got sick of it. So now they're getting into the point where like they don't even solve the crimes. There was this one called Appalachia Unsolved, and I was like, oh, these are going to be like, like mysterious, just like, and the outhouse was locked from the inside kind of thing, right? No, it was just like run-of-the-mill crimes, like somebody shot a zoology professor at UGA in the back, and they were like, we sure
that's
like
just sad.
yeah, we're like, well, they like, we sure like to figure out who did it. Appalachia Unsolved. I'm like, that's it. That's the fucking episode. Like,
It's not even like something out on the Appalachian Trail, which is what I was hoping.
not
Just like
even,
some weird, crazy stuff out in the woods. But
well,
no,
not
this
even,
is
yeah.
just like this school. It's kind of close to the mountains. Had a professor shot one time. We'd sure like to know who got him.
Because at least, like with Unsolved Mysteries, when they would do kind of what I would call like an average crime, like, oh, this guy went missing. But then they'd be like, somebody in Minnesota claimed to have seen him at the red and white supermarket. So at least there was like a little bit of
a
like,
mystery.
oh, yeah. No, this one was just straight up like, so way back in 2006, somebody was stealing cars. We sure would like to find them.
There's one YouTuber, murder mystery guy that I follow called That Chapter. And it's pretty good. He's pretty good at like finding little obscure but interesting murder stories. But just recently, like I was sitting there and like everybody in the comment section, because I was coming to the video a day late, and I was reading through some of the comments while he was doing his intro, and they were like, "Wow, you're scraping the barrel at this point." And it's like by the end of the thing, he's like, "So this case is still ongoing. They haven't caught the killer." And I'm sitting there going, "Why are you doing a video on it? Like you
Yeah.
just sat here and described to us everything that the prosecution has brought, or that rather that the police have brought. They haven't even found the person that did it. And I was like, scraping the barrel a little bit. No, they're really scraping the barrel when they go and do the Jack the Ripper murders. That's how you know they've reached the end of murder, is they have to do. But every true crime podcast, it is a requirement. They are legally obligated. You have to do Jack the Ripper at some point. And then that guy, what is it, H.H. Holmes?
Yeah.
The Chicago's Jack the Ripper.
Yeah.
Who had the crazy murder
He had a really
house,
cool house. Yeah.
Didn't.
Yeah, at least he was.
Didn't. That was all just sensationalized yellow journalism.
Oh, really? Oh, that's so terrible. I love the murder house and like the hallways that didn't go anywhere and the doors that.
Yeah, he did like kidnap people and keep them in the house, but like the whole like it's a second Winchester house type thing. No, that never happened. I will say, or at least we have no actual evidence that it did.
I always picture like a real life Jigsaw mansion somewhere out there in the world, and people are like trapped and like trying to find their way through. It's like, oh, well, which way? Open this door, and it just leads to more ladders and stairs and chutes.
I will say the last podcast guys did a really good episode because they really like laid out the background of like the era he lived in. Yeah. And it was really interesting because fucking people would just vanish and like just nobody's looking for them because it's the fucking 1800s. And if you vanish, fuck you, pal. Like there's no cops trying to solve crimes.
Yeah.
No, and there was a one lady who like I think this was like while the West was being settled, like it might be just after the Civil War, but it was like she was living in Ohio and all of a sudden her house burned down and her husband died in the fire. Oh no. So she took the money and she moved to like Illinois. And then 5 years later, oh no, her house burned down and her husband was in there and died. Oh no. And then she moves a little further west and that happens again. And everyone's like, well, how does this, the poor lady, how does this keep happening to her? And then finally
she's the Carol Baskin of fires.
Someone walked up and went, excuse me, ma'am, but I believe you have committed a textbook case of insurance fraud, and it's a new thing that's just been invented and we're trying to crack down on it. Like
I gotta say, like, people always talk about like time travel, but time travel would be amazing for fucking criminals. Can you imagine if you were like you're a criminal in like 2021 and you were able to go back literally anywhere, especially when DNA was new and people didn't believe in it before CSI was a show? There were just so many crimes that were so much easier to do.
Well, that's one of the theories behind the Jack the Ripper murders, is that it was a time traveler or an alien for some reason that just wanted to off hookers or sex workers in Victorian England.
It was so easy to just murder somebody back then. You could just stab someone in the face and walk over a block.
Jack the Ripper was actually a series of billionaires from the 2040s who time traveled just to commit murder.
Yeah,
just for the fun of it. Like, what was that case where the two white people like murdered a Japanese man and the judge let them go because they're not the type of people that go to prison and they're not going to do it again. They're not causing harm to no one.
Many cases, I'm assuming, happen where
like that.
Like
all you have to do is just be white and you can get away with it or whatever.
Well, especially back then, you could be like, I saw some ethnics nearby, and then
some black people. You got to go down to the Negro bar and see what they're doing, and then like every one of them would be arrested.
Side of town,
terrible.
Cops, how are things on the white side of town? Perfect.
Super interestingly enough, I was watching a whole. I got to finish it. It's called Trial 4, about this guy that was basically railroaded by the Boston PD in the 80s. But to highlight his case, they follow another case where a guy and his pregnant wife got out of a Pilates or I don't know, a Lamaze class or something, and they get in their car and somebody just came and shot them up. She died, he didn't. And the cops were like, who could have done this? And he just goes, it was a black man with a raspy voice. So the Boston PD went to the black side of town.
Puerto Rican guy.
They went to the black side of town and they kicked in every fucking door being like, is there a black guy in here with a raspy voice? Turns out the guy shot himself and his own wife in an insurance scam.
Yeah.
All right. So speaking of scams,
everything in the past is awful.
Let's get into some of the news here. I wanted to ask you guys a question. So right now they're talking about we might have like a weird kind of two Americas thing. This is in the Guardian, as like a coronavirus variant is spreading. And like vaccination rates are going down, so we're not going to hit that 70%.
Some states have like 2.
Yeah.
But,
so the question is,
country.
if people aren't getting vaccinated, and a new variant is spreading, and at least those of us who are vaccinated are protected from the variant, what is society going to look like? Do you think that,
I feel like if the variant is aggressive enough and deadly enough, what we're going to see is we'll eventually hit that 70% vaccination rate just through sheer Darwinism.
do you think that like these people though, that like businesses will actually begin like banning unvaccinated people? Like I know cruise ships are going to be the first place where they've already
they're
kind of
suing. So Royal Caribbean,
Right.
Carnival, and I think Disney's getting in on it too. They're suing Florida for their mandatory, you can't do a vaccine passport.
That's good. That's a follow-up to that I had not heard about. I knew that
Yeah.
Florida said that cruises have to accept unvaccinated people. You can't require them to be vaccinated to come on this cruise.
Why
I didn't
not?
realize that they then said, fuck you, you do have to.
Florida's GOP has decided that vaccines are the devil.
Right.
And that no one should be forced to get them to do anything, even privileges like going on a cruise.
But I thought everybody was all like laissez-faire capitalism, y'all.
Yeah.
You know.
Yeah.
No.
They believe in that until it helps humans. As soon as people are safer, then they're like, no, we got to shut that down. People have to die or it's not laissez-faire.
My problem is that like vaccination,
and the government has to actively help kill people. Like it has to be. It can't just be a passive let them die. It has to be an active you will die.
Like exactly. It's not let them eat cake. It's force them to eat knives.
To me, the issue was already settled because you're already required in a lot of places if you want to participate to have vaccination records. You can't go to college. You can't go to public school. I couldn't work for the fire department.
You're talking about legal precedent.
Arrangement.
Yeah. So my point is there's already legal precedent for them to ask you or at least have proof of vaccination records. I don't know why this is any different. You know what I mean?
Because it's been politicized. So they have to do stuff to fire up the base and to make sure that they don't lose votes from people that are all like, vaccines, hell no. Bill Gates ain't put no chip in me.
Yeah, is it just the idiot ball? Do you think eventually
it's right now,
the idiot ball's getting more people
killed.
Obama
is sending wave after wave after wave of immigrant into this country in order to vaccinate your children. There'll be abortion stands on every corner. It's just Biden is of the devil, real socialism. Hold the fuck out. Somebody tweeted at a communist Star Trekker, and they tweeted that you're giving socialism a bad name, and then put up a photo of God we love her, Stacey Abrams, as shaking hands with Joe Biden, and this person legitimately, unironically said, "These are the real socialists, the ones that are helping us." And I was like, oh my God, I love Stacey Abrams, but she's not a socialist. Oh my God. Like, holy fucking shit. People do not know what that word means. Even like, and liberals are the worst with it. They have no fucking clue what the hell socialist means. Like Joe Biden was the real socialist the whole time.
Correct.
You guys.
Joe Biden's basically a Ronald Reagan Republican. Like,
yeah, correct me if I'm wrong, but isn't socialism just basically the stuff that we all pay into, like fire department, police?
Socialism at its most basic explanation is the workers own the means of production. Now you get into communism and it's basically you're going for the utopian, which is no one owns anything. But communism, especially as in the Soviet and the Maoist model, is what could be termed authoritarian communism. And the successors to Mao also kind of got away from that, but that was because Mao's Cultural Revolution actually did what it was supposed to do, which was basically tamp down. Because Mao actually there were capitalists who backed Mao because they saw that the nationalists, they were fighting each other after World War II. They actually saw that the nationalists were just going to do some Nazi shit when they came to power. And a lot of people are like, oh, well, Mao killed trillions of people. The nationalists also killed millions of people. Yeah. Like there was one instance where in order to defeat the communists in like this valley, they decided to blow up a dam, and it flooded something like 5 million people. Supposedly,
Yeah.
hundreds of thousands of people died just to root out the communists. The communists were not even in that valley.
That's
like,
a crazy thing about like the Chinese Civil War is
they paused.
And
they took a pause to try and defeat Japan.
I don't know if I don't know if it's like racism, if it's because like during World War II, like, oh, these are Western Europeans being rounded up and murdered, and in like China it was just Chinese people being killed by the scores, but like no one really seems.
Japan committed so many fucking atrocities.
There
like,
doesn't
the
there
rape
doesn't
of Nanking
yeah
is not an overblown statement. It was a rape.
The rape of Nanking is actually the first book that I wasn't allowed to read. So, just give you a quick backstory. My grandfather had like basically a whole room in his house that was a library. He was like a scholar. And so he had just bought this Time Life comprehensive guide like about the rape of Nanking. And I was like, I must have been like 9 or 10, and I was always over in his library like reading books, and so I happened to see this new book, the rape of Nanking. What is this? So like I took it home, and like we lived like not too far, you could walk over to our house, and I took it home, but something happened, I didn't read it. It was sitting just on the dinner table, and he comes home and he sees the empty space in his bookshelf where the rape of Nanking is missing. And like he like calls my mom and he's like, Sandra, where is the boy? He's got a book he shouldn't read. And like my old ass stroke-ridden grandpa like ran over to our house, like threw open the door and was like, where's the boy? Where's the book? Because he didn't want my psyche to be fucking ruined by the horrific images from the Japanese atrocities. And like,
well,
so that's
and
why
neither does the Japanese government, who still refuses to acknowledge that anything untoward occurred. The whole thing with, especially in Korea, both North and South Korea have a bone to pick with the current government of Japan over so-called comfort women or sex slaves, basically. And it's the whole history of Japan and Korea is just Japan, Korea, and Northern China is just absolutely incredible. Like, some people actually to this day make the claim that Manchukuo is Korean soil. Like through, and a lot of people believe that Japan should not have been stripped of Korea at the end of World War II because they had held that land for so much longer. Like, they had gotten that in, like, I want to say the 1890s. So, it was well before the whole rise of totalitarianism and all that stuff. So I don't, I know where I stand on that, and where I stand on that is that fuck countries, we shouldn't have them. They were a bad idea.
I'm a big fan of like control your own destiny, decolonize, like everyone. You know what I mean? Like fucking.
Well, that was basically what Japan was doing. That sparked off the Eastern theater of World War II. They were doing a colonialism. They were like, and they were literally. They were literally coming into some places as liberators, though, especially in the Dutch East Indies. Like,
well, the problem, the problem with it
was were like, "Oh, you're kicking the Dutch out? That's fucking wonderful."
They came in as liberals, and everybody was like, "Oh, this is great," because they had this whole slogan called "Asian for the Asiatics" and all this stuff, and everyone's like, "That's awesome! You kicked out our colonial oppressors." And then
they
they're
actually
like,
wanted to call their version of the Soviet Union was like one country with a few satellites, right? And it was like a collection of countries, sort of like how the European Union is a collection of countries. And what they wanted to create was basically a shit ton of puppet states all around them that were ethnically divided but dominated by Japanese culture. And what they wanted to call it, it's the most Japanese name for a collection of countries you will ever hear. It was supposed to be called the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity Sphere.
That sounds like a restaurant I had Japanese food at the other day.
It sounds like
if they took all that and just like crammed it together into one word, and then it would sound even more Japanese.
No idea what it would have been, like what the acronym would have been, but and it's in fact, if you watch The Man in the High Castle, the Pacific States of America are the only Japanese controlled territory that is not part of the Greater East Asia Co-Prosperity.
Well, that's like
everyone's
because
it's not East Asia.
Everyone's had food at the Greater East Asian Co-Prosperity King Buffet before.
Exactly.
Great EAO Co or something like that, because they have a thing where they cram like not just the first letter of each word, but just like parts of each word all together.
Exactly. Yeah. It's But no. To answer your earlier question, yeah, both the Republicans and the Democrats are neoliberals. Like that's the economics that we've got.
Well, I wonder if you're going to have a group of people that refuse to vaccinate and are going to be just like, I don't know, like second class, like you're not allowed to go to a lot of places,
go to places or do things.
Yeah, and
maybe they'll just go get the vaccine then.
Yeah, will they eventually shut up and get vaccinated?
You could just, I would hope so.
Or is it going to create?
It's
one of my.
It's like how they keep charging people more and more for cigarettes, right? Like that's to encourage a certain type of behavior without forcing it. They're technically forcing it to some people that could never afford like $15 for one pack of smokes.
You tax things you want people to stop doing.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Yeah.
So this is sort of the opposite of that. Like, how do you tax things that you want people to start doing? Like every day you can't produce the card, they have to like pay up another $15.
Well, you know, normally you
they have in some places they have incentivized getting the vaccine. There was a girl, there was like a 22-year-old woman in I think Ohio who won $1 million for getting vaccinated whenever the local news went to like interview her, and she was like yeah, I mean I got vaccinated, it wasn't because of the prize. I thought that was a joke, honestly. I was like, it's like I thought they were kidding. Like,
I think a lot of places around here you can go to get like free donuts and stuff if you like show them your.
I think honestly card. you ought to offer a second smaller stimulus to people that go get vaccinated.
Have been vaccinated? Oh yeah.
You know what I mean? Like, hey, get vaccinated. Fucking get your $200 from the IRS.
Yeah,
$200.
Oh my god.
Right? Yeah.
Yeah, and I guarantee like that would close a lot of the gap.
Basically just like increase everyone's taxes this year by 500, but you get that 500 back if you've been vaccinated. So technically you're being taxed for if you don't do something. That'd be a good way to do that.
I'm guessing that this will fade because these people generally don't hang on to these dumb convictions. As long as whenever the news cycle moves on, like whatever.
And it's also the grifters who are trying to profit off of this whole idea of I'm not getting the vaccine. Like it's the grifters. The grifters are the ones that are keeping it going.
Keeping the news cycle going.
As soon as it does not become profitable. In this I mean like, you know, clicks on a website. That's why the anti-vax movement got started, was clicks on websites. Like, you know, that's, you know, getting that AdSense.
The news cycle goes so slow these days too, compared to like the Trump cycle. I remember like there could be something in the morning that I'd be livid about and I wouldn't even remember it by noon because 10 more scandals have broken since then. And Muckrakers back then was crazy because I would start each episode with a list of like 300 bullet points that we need to cover, and we'd get through like 2 and then it would be time to go. It's like, all right, Dear Wesley time then.
Yeah, exactly.
These days, like, what's on the news this week?
Well, the biggest thing is
Putin. Like, that's it, and literally nothing else has happened.
Well, the biggest thing is like
nothing happened during their meeting, and we know that because they actually released the transcript this time, unlike this time last year.
I feel like the biggest issue with Biden is like he's not. I don't know. It shows that even when the Democrats win, they lose.
Yeah,
you know, like. If this had been, if we had another Republican president with Republican control of like the House and the Senate, they'd be passing passing legislation.
But I mean, we do remember Trump's first 2 years. They tried and failed 5 times to repeal and replace Obamacare.
They tried that again.
They tried and failed 5 times. And like, I literally told someone that I had the argument with years ago, whenever he's like, they need to repeal and replace it. I'm like, that's great. Replace it with what?
Yeah, that's my thing.
My ears are open. It's not working.
Let's they never had a plan.
Replace it with what? They never had a plan. And he's like, well, of course they have a plan. And then whenever the first one failed, I was like, I have to apologize because I didn't think I was actually right about that.
Yeah. No. I always see in politics.
So I'm sorry that I lied to you then.
The dumbest thing you can do in politics
so fucking right.
is to give somebody something and then try to take it back. That's like the third rail of politics.
No. There was a Republican in I believe it might have been Iowa or Ohio, and they said they were interviewed by NBC for like a little local package, and it was just straight up saying it. He said it. You know, he said the quiet part out loud. He said whenever the Supreme Court struck down California v. Texas. Or rather just didn't decide to reverse the lower court's decision that Texas cannot sue California for participating in Obamacare. And this Republican, I think he was a House rep. He might have been a senator. I don't know. It was either Ohio or Iowa, but he came out and said the quiet part out loud. He said, you know, and it just really, you know, basically he was saying it burns his ass that the court in a 7-2 decision decided this. He said, you know, it's just getting it more entrenched. And the longer it's there, the more ingrained in society it's going to be. The more ingrained in society it's going to be that we should have affordable health care.
Yeah,
exactly.
Like,
the whole right to life is sort of right there in the Constitution that they all claim to
exactly,
or at least the preamble. But speaking of that court case, the beauty part of it is that they failed to repeal Obamacare because of a previous attempt to repeal Obamacare struck down the penalty for not being in Obamacare. If they had not gotten rid of the penalty in an attempt to kill it, then this might have actually worked. They might have been able to have a leg to stand on.
But that's Republican. That is like peak Republican right there, because it's all about the short-term gains. It's all about the short-term gains. That's why Trump was so fucking chaotic, and that's why the end of George W. Bush was so fucking chaotic. It's just short-term gains. They're all in there with these fucking stockbrokers and fucking CEOs and shit like that, who are just like, no, we just need to get it a little bit better for us, just a little bit better for us, just a little bit.
Because we're a plutocracy, and like the wealthy control America, so they look at the world through the next quarterly earnings.
You know,
so
it's
that's
funny.
How politics works.
It's funny that you say that.
In fact, one of the only dissenters, so there were 14 all Republicans who did not vote, who voted no on making Juneteenth a national federal holiday, and one of the guys who didn't vote, he was a no vote on the. He had voted against it when it went through the House the first time because it was introduced in the House. Went to the Senate, got changed a little bit, came back, and there we go. It was unanimous in the Senate, but 14 Republicans either didn't vote or voted no. And his excuse for it was, he goes, well, I mean, that's $600 million in paid time off for all federal employees, but I guess we're not looking at the fiscal side of this. It's like, what the fuck?
When did you guys care about the fiscal side of it?
Yeah. That's your reasoning for not celebrating pretty much the actual end of slavery. It didn't actually end. This is another thing that's really pissing me off. White people, holy shit. Juneteenth is not when slavery ended. Juneteenth is when the last few slaves learned they were free. Because in Texas, they decided, we're not going to tell them.
Yeah.
That's what happened.
Yep.
Like that was when slaves in Galveston and the surrounding areas found out they were no longer private property, and that they were actually considered citizens. Like it just blows my mind.
The Vice.
No, this isn't a racist country. How dare you teach?
Vice has done. Vice did interviews with people, and I assume parts
I thought
of.
You're about to say that Vice did interviews with surviving slaves. Like
they did. Hold on.
200-year-old.
You're laughing, but like there were people that were in essence kind of still enslaved up into the 60s. They interviewed an old guy, and he was like, "Look." He's like, we lived down here. We were kind of like, we had to work. If you tried to run away, they'd come bring you back or kill you. Yep. And so basically de facto slavery still existed in pockets in the United States, even into the fucking 60s.
Well, it still exists today in the form of prison labor.
Yeah.
Pretty much anything you see that says made in the USA was made in a prison.
Yeah.
Like you want to bring back domestic manufacturing? It's already here. It's just in prisons. Oh, yeah, and every helmet.
That's the only way it can be like profitable is if there's no labor cost.
Every helmet worn by U.S. service members in Iraq and Afghanistan was manufactured in a prison.
Nice. Yeah. I don't know why
but the prisoners are making like $270 an hour.
Yeah.
Whereas the prison, and some of these were private prisons before the Obama era, put the kibosh on that, or mostly put the kibosh on that, just said we're not going to re-up our contracts. And that's when a lot of these private prison companies went into the, you guessed it, immigrant detention facility game. And that's, isn't it fun? Everything in the past was terrible.
It just brings me back to my high school days whenever like we started kind of getting political, especially thanks to what was the band with they're trying to build a prison?
So
that was System of a Down.
Yeah, System of a Down
yeah.
like really got us. We're
They're
just
trying
like,
to build a prison.
yeah, there's just a bunch of high school, yeah, like, which
Why do they always send the poor?
Yeah.
That was our generation's we don't need no education. That
Yeah,
was
yeah, yeah.
Don't need no false control.
Well, anyway, so staying pretty much on topic, Wesley actually had a question for us
Yes.
to do a whole episode on, but it really doesn't need a whole episode. I can explain it right now in about 10 minutes. Do you guys think I can do that real quick?
Yeah, basically, Uncle Bobby, why don't rich people pay taxes?
Well,
why don't rich people pay taxes?
Why
Bobby?
don't they pay taxes? It's how do they avoid tax? That's the whole thing, and that's the difference here. Is it's illegal to not pay taxes. It is entirely legal to avoid tax.
I had someone the other day tell me, because I was talking about paying your fair share of taxes, and this guy goes, yeah, well, Bill Gates and them, it's because they don't claim it as income, so they're not doing anything wrong. And I'm like,
well,
I mean,
okay. So
like,
the top tax bracket right now, I believe, is at 37%. I think it's on all income past $455,000 per annum. So the upper middle class, because that's pretty much where the upper middle class ends. The upper middle class is really the only people that approach that tax bracket or barely pass it that actually pay that. And it's on every dollar past that amount. That's what a progressive tax rate is. So, the below 18,000 a year, you're not paying anything on that.
Right.
You just get 18,000 a year, and then it's like, I think it's up to 29. It goes up to like 8%, I want to say. Anyway, so it's every dollar after that first bracket ends gets taxed, but nothing after it. Like, your tax rate doesn't automatically jump that high. Well, anyway, so because it's not the wealthy that are avoiding tax, it's the super rich to the moon, fucking
because when you're that rich, you can hire smart people to figure out how to
9-digit millionaires and billionaires who are doing this tax avoidance, and how they do this legally. How do they avoid taxes? Because remember, legally distinct between evading taxes, which is illegal, and avoiding taxes, which is legal. Okay, so what you do is, let's say right now, Wilda, you have $155 million to your name.
Hell yeah, spending 10 million of them to send bees to Wesley.
How do you not pay taxes on your $1.5 million a year income? Well,
you're probably gonna hire a senator or somebody to lobby a senator to make a bee loophole.
You don't even need to, because it's already all in place. Like, there's no like, just take it out. Like,
other people have laid the this is like rich people socialism. Other people have paved the roads for me. I just have to walk down them.
It's much worse than that. It's not even socialism. It is all fucking capitalism. The government is not giving these people any money. They're just allowing them to keep it. So
it's just an infrastructure.
Whenever the Panama Papers came out, a lot of people were curious as to why, whenever the Panama Papers and the Paradise Papers came out, like, British millionaires got hit, French millionaires got hit, German millionaires got hit, like Canadian millionaires got hit, Mexican millionaires got hit, but it seemed like there wasn't anybody from the United States on that list. Well, ladies and gentlemen, let me introduce you to this concept of the United States itself as a tax haven. Okay, so what you do, and this is fucking genius.
Well, just for people that don't know about
taxes, hang on. This is the main thrust. You don't pay taxes on money you have been lent.
What?
You don't pay taxes on money that you have been lent. It is not counted as income. You also do not pay taxes on stocks and bonds that you hold.
That's the equivalent of yelling, not it during tax season.
Hang on. You only pay taxes if you sell the stocks and bonds. You pay taxes on the income you got from that. But the IRS does not count bonds and stocks held as taxable income.
The fuck
so
not?
What you do, however, while the IRS does not count them as income, banks count it as an asset. So what you would do, Wildo, with your $155 million
Right.
is all of that is, well, most of that is tied up in stocks and bonds. From your company that you own, you're only paying yourself about $87,000 a year. And the rest of it, the rest to, in order to, you know, afford your lavish lifestyle, showing off to other millionaires and trying to pile up to get to that billionaire rank just so you can show off, because no one needs $100 million. No one does. That is beyond, like, if someone came along one time and said nobody needs to be a billionaire, I was like, nobody needs $100 million, let alone be a billionaire. But like, personally need it, that's well beyond all of your needs are met. Okay, well beyond it. Well, anyway, so what you do, because of this very Reaganomics way to look at it, you go to a bank and say, I have $155 million in assets. I would like a loan for $155 million at a 0.0001% interest. And the bank goes, well, you've already got the money, so that's a pretty safe bet for us. If we need to call on it, it'll all be there. And so you take out the loan and you live off of the loan. And what's paying the interest on the loan is the non-taxable dividends that you get for owning the stock. Once you reach that point where you're able to make that happen, you're never paying taxes again. And you're just going to keep accruing these loans that are all backed up by your stocks. Now, you're not buying stocks with the loans. You're buying stocks with your actual assets and the profit from your dividends. You just keep piling it on until eventually you become the Balrog and you're a dragon and you live, or you become Smaug and you're a dragon who lives on top of a giant pile of treasure. And then some hobbits come along and try to play you. Like, yeah, exactly.
Oh, so those nasty hobbitses.
So that's how a lot of wealthy people in the United States avoid tax, is because of this very real loophole. And it's also part of the reason why, you know, whenever conservatives are like, oh, we're taxing billionaires too much, it's like, no, we're not taxing them anything.
Yeah,
we're not taxing them anything.
Well, generally, because a billionaire paid them to say
that. Whenever someone like Elizabeth Warren comes along and goes, that's a pretty cool tax scheme you got there going on, that tax avoidance scheme you got going on there with that, with all those super low interest rate loans that you can afford, would be super bad if someone came along and said, I don't know, just taxed your wealth outright. That would throw a wrench into everything. It would seriously, a wealth tax in the United States would knock the current Forbes top 10 richest Americans, it would knock them into the basement immediately.
Good.
But the problem is, I think if you even brought that to a vote to the floor, say magic happened.
No, because the Senate would never go for it, because some senators are actively using this program in order to enrich themselves.
But say that you
also they're all beholden to their wealthy benefactors, and there's millions of dollars worth of propaganda out there all the time, which would destroy people like Elizabeth Warren if she tried to really hard to actually pass this.
In a magic world, if that even came to a vote in the Senate, they would blow up the fucking Senate before they allowed it to come to a vote.
They would be a drone strike from like Bezos.
Yeah, they would just Amazon drones, just blowing up they would kill everyone in government before it ever got to that point. Yeah, they would.
But anyway, I knew a lot of this just from like reading about it and stuff like that. But there's a really good video from kind of a smallish YouTube channel called George Rockall Schmidt. I'll get Wilder to put a link to it in the thing. It's the video that I sent you guys on Messenger.
Gotcha.
Yeah, it's called The Bizarre Story: How the Super Rich Avoid Taxes (brackets legally). Because remember, it's not evasion if you're only avoiding. And that's what they're doing. They're avoiding tax, and that's how they're able to do that. So, whenever you start getting into, at one point in the 90s, I think it was Bill Gates was earning something to the effect of like 1% US GDP in income. Jesus Christ. Yeah.
Speaking of Eat the Rich, I have new That's Cute news this week. It turns out California's god-awful drought and water shortage. Well, the drought's not caused by the rich, but the water shortage actually is. Rich people are fucking them over. It's because businesses get whatever they want, and what they want right now is for the entire ecosystem to work for them. So that's what happens. It's farmers out there in California that's causing the severe water shortage, because farmers out there is not the small, mom and pop farmers on their tractor going out anymore. Oh, no. It's all corporations. And right now,
Nestle.
and It's so the crux of this whole thing is it all comes down to almonds, and that they are the most water thirsty plant on earth, apparently, as far as I can tell.
It is a
Because
very thirsty nut.
it is. And speaking of thirsty nuts, so if you take a fruit like, say, a tomato, and it takes about 10 gallons of water per pound of tomatoes you want. Most fruits like strawberries, 10 pound or 1 pound of strawberries, about 10 gallons of water. 1 pound of almonds is 1,900 gallons of water.
Yeah.
And I'm gonna maybe make a
In California produces 81% of all the almonds on Earth. Not just in America, but on Earth. That's where the water shortage is coming in. Because they are not adjusting also, for drought time, so it's just fucking everyone else.
Almonds aren't even that good.
I don't know what the ratios are, but that's why a lot of people are switching over to like from almond milk to oat milk because it's a lot more sustainable as a nut.
Fuck, dude,
I personally prefer flaxseed milk because that way you actually get omega-3s. But like that's very hard to find, sadly.
I'm not gonna fuck with almonds ever again. I don't like almonds anyway.
Good Karma's a good brand.
Almonds, it's a trash nut. Like, it's a thirsty, trashy nut.
We should name that's what this episode's gonna be.
Thirsty trashy nuts.
Thirsty, trashy nuts and how they avoid paying taxes.
Yeah, no, that's the thing. There's, like I said,
thirsty nut tax haven.
I'll bring up the book I read, but right out of California, that book I'm reading for the class I'm in right now details California agriculture, how they basically created a collective where the growers all got together to fix wage prices and bust unions and fuck workers. And I guess California has continued to do that, and now they're fucking the ecosystem.
Well, because of neoliberalism. Again, neoliberalism.
The title.
Neoliberalism started with neoliberalism really started with Carter, but Reagan was the one that just grabbed it and ran with it. Like, it was, and then we had with the election of Bill Clinton, we had the decline of the New Deal Democrat, and thankfully we're starting to get some of those back, like Ilhan Omar and AOC and people like that. Like, it's
that's why the propagandists sink their teeth into them so deep, because they realize that's where the real threat's coming from.
I do love all the memes about Ben Shapiro wanting to get feet pics of AOC. Like, that is just, oh my God, it's fucking beautiful. It's So you say you won't debate me? Curious. Send me photos of your feet. Like,
I will say though, Ben Shapiro gives me hope. If he is like the standard carrier for the right, I feel safe.
He's not. Oh, they've just announced the speakers for CPAC, and one of them is actually a guy who believes that all Black people are Jews, and that the Israeli Jews, the Zionists especially, are fake Jews who run the media and are trying to destroy everything, and has already spoken out against Ben Shapiro. Dude, the right is eating itself. That really guy is, but here's the thing, is that the Republican Party has tried to eat itself on several occasions, and it's always come up rosy. Everyone who's like, oh, this will surely be the end of the Republican Party. You're an idiot. You're an absolute fucking moron. You're a forehead. You're a moron.
Like, it's kind of very thirsty or like, it just keeps going.
It's kind of like I feel like it's kind of like Lord of the Rings trilogy, right? Where we're like, we'll get rid of the ring this time.
Yeah, we'll get rid of the ring this time. Yeah.
And then someone's like, wait, maybe I'll hang on to the Republican Party a little bit longer.
But put it on and disappear into obscurity.
All right, you guys ready for a Father's Day? By the way, it's Father's Day, so happy Father's Day to all the dads.
Happy Father's Day.
I have a
dads out there.
I have a Father's Day Dear Wesley for us.
Hell let's do it.
So it begins. I am a stay-at-home mom. We have 5 kids, a 7-year-old, a 7-year-old girl, a 5-year-old boy, a 4-year-old boy, a 22-month-old girl, and a 6-month-old boy. My husband works a lot, and I'm grateful for the money he brings in, but it's a lot of work to be home with all the kids. Yeah, no shit. 5 fucking kids, like, your work never ends. My husband was pretty helpful until kid number 4. I encouraged him to have a vasectomy, but he didn't. I was on birth control, but still got pregnant with our 5th kid, and then finally got my tubes tied. So already it's just like, Jesus Christ, we got 5 kids, or we got 4 kids. Honey, you want to get your tubes tied or get a vasectomy? Fuck you, lady. So she says, my husband works a lot and I'm grateful for the money he brings, but it's a lot of work to be home with the kids. Let's see. So anyway, he works 5 days a week and he works on Saturdays when needed. On Sundays, he either spends time with us, hangs out with friends, or works in his home office. On Mother's Day, he had a busy week at his job and spent that Sunday working in his home office. On my birthday, he didn't even say happy birthday. I reminded him and he goes, yeah, I remember. So yesterday he asked what I was doing for Father's Day so he can schedule his day around it. I told him I was doing the same thing he did for Mother's Day. Nothing. I told him until we go to marriage counseling, I don't want to do anything for his birthday or Father's Day because he doesn't do anything for me. His argument was that it's different because he works and I don't. So I have time that he doesn't have.
Not necessarily.
Happy Father's Day. Yeah.
Not necessarily. I can understand if he has like a shit job and hates his life, but otherwise, like, no, they're both fucking busy all the time. If she has 5 kids to take care of, she doesn't have time to. What is her hobby gonna be? Like not tripping over the Legos?
I'm gonna just say,
Jesus
if
Christ.
I had the choice between going to my 9 to 5 or being at home and raising 5 fucking kids of different ages, I'd rather go to work.
Yeah, like I'm trying to think, how many kids would I have to have before I'm like, okay, I'd rather just go to some job all day? Probably 2. Like maybe okay, 1 would be a great number because at that point, if anything goes wrong, you know who to blame. If it's 2 kids, maybe you can manage it, just let them know they're responsible for each other. If something goes wrong, they're both in trouble.
Well, this
3
gets
plus
to the
starts
idea,
to get too insane. It's like,
this
okay,
gets
this
to the
sucks.
idea that
I'm
like
outta here.
domestic labor isn't labor.
Yeah.
That's the whole concept.
Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
And that's actually part of the rise of capitalism in post medieval Europe, like during the Enlightenment. So before that, even if you were a serf, like you were born into a family and you worked for your family. It was very communal. Right. And then as the capitalists needed, the industrialists specifically needed, hands to work in their factories, it went from you were working for and with your family to you were working for a wage from someone else.
Right.
And as the agricultural revolution really took off with like mechanized farming, early mechanized farming, you needed fewer and fewer people to grow crops. And it was like, a lot of people were like, oh, well, we're losing our jobs. So they all moved to the cities and you started doing this. And it was, of course, women were not allowed to work in a lot of machine plants. Textiles is an obvious exception to that. And it slowly became that, the domestic work was women's work. Whenever before it was just basically all hands on deck. If mom wants to do this, then she does that. And then if dad's done doing something else, he comes in and does this. But that's really where that got started. It is not a natural condition of humanity,
right?
At least for the majority of our existence, for women to be subservient in the home and men to be the breadwinners who go out.
I can guarantee you, if you went back to like Neolithic times, if your wife was really good at throwing a fucking spear through a fucking saber tooth, you're not going to be like, honey, let the men do it. You're going to be like, get us a saber tooth, bitch. I'll mind the kids. Like it was whoever was good at whatever.
All right.
Because if you send like the feeble person after the saber tooth, he gets eaten. The saber tooth eats your whole camp that night. Yeah. So kind of important.
In honor of it having had been Juneteenth. Jesus Christ. Can I do my everything in the past was terrible?
Yep.
Yes.
Yep.
Do you want to know what Wesley's answer to that previous problem was?
No, wait, I totally forgot. Yeah.
What's Wesley's answer?
What Wesley's answer is, well, what you gotta do is after the first kid, you just start having butt sex because you can't get an asshole pregnant.
Or why don't you send the kids to work? Let Dad take a day off. There's 5 of them. You could put them in an overcoat and they'd figure it out.
He could be a really tall guy that shows up at the office and gets everything clean. He could clean the surface lights.
Have I ever sent you guys the video? There's a YouTube channel called Characters Welcome. That's like a sketch comedy troupe. I think it's out of New York or Los Angeles. I forget which one. But there's one comedian there who does this routine called 2 trench coats and a kid. And it is absolutely hilarious. He's like walking around like it's just got a sleeve coming out of like under his shirt. He's like, hello there, I am a human child. I have several imaginations and I would like to purchase a ticket to Paddington Bear 2, a movie that's doing wonders for jacket representation. Like it's just because I am a human child filled with whimsy and a lot of dryer sheets. It's like, where would two trench coats even find a child's body at a funeral yesterday morning? Like, it's like,
That's amazing.
oh man.
Wonderful.
No, okay, so everything in the past was terrible. And I
It
don't
was.
know if I've talked about this, but this is a really terrible, terrible moment of the past. So white people, please fucking listen, because slavery was not all fucking bread and roses. So the 1811 German Coast Uprising was the largest rebellion of slaves in the United States at any point. Okay, and it was a lot smaller than, you know, the headline slave revolt, which is of course the Haitian revolt, but it took place on Louisiana's German coast, which is basically several bends in the east bank of the Mississippi River, upstream of New Orleans, downstream from Baton Rouge. This area was known for, as much of southern Louisiana was known for, sugarcane, 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 sugarcane. Even under French and Spanish control, sugar was king there, instead of, like, you know, say places along the Black Belt through the South where it was cotton was king.
That's also one of the most brutal. It was also one of the most brutal crops that if you were enslaved that you would have to do with sugarcane.
Absolutely fucking awful. And anyway, so projections on it are wild. Okay, about, it was somewhere between 60 and 150 enslaved men, it was all men, marched from sugar plantation to sugar plantation between, let me see, it's between present day Laplace, Louisiana, which is kind of an outer lying suburb. It's sort of an intraburb between Baton Rouge metro area and the greater New Orleans metro area. People commute from Laplace to both cities and from both cities to Laplace. Like, it's kind of a halfway point on I-10, and it's right where I-55 ends. Anyway, so they traveled downriver along the German coast. They set fire to 4 plantations along the way, freeing more slaves. And that's where the variation in the numbers of how many took part. There were actually some enslaved people who protected whites from the revolting slaves. It was mostly house slaves doing that, like protecting the children and things like that. They harassed a lot of white plantation owners, and they killed 2 of them. All of the slaves who revolted 2 days later were rounded up. I think it was, let me see here. Sorry, I've got Wikipedia open. 44 of them were tried and executed same day. Let's see. Okay, so on the first day, 40 to 45 escaped slaves were hunted down by several plantation owners who had paid for a militia to be assembled. And then over the next 2 weeks, white planters and officials interrogated, tried, and executed mostly by hanging and firing squad, but also there were some decapitations. It was a French place. Decapitations happened. And 44 of the slaves, they took their heads post-mortem and put them on spikes all along the Spanish Trail. That was basically a road that the Spanish had built connecting Baton Rouge with Nouvelle Orleans. And just as a warning to the other slaves, don't fucking try it. And yeah, to this day, some of the plantation owners who participated in this, they have the city of Kenner, which is one of the largest suburbs of New Orleans, is named after a plantation owner who lost their life or was part of the slaughter, basically. But these are basically people who if you want to learn about it, highly recommend Actun Shea Films. He does a wonderful series on it. But I would also like to point out, okay, so this that I have right here, this is a sculpture at a plantation in Louisiana. A lot of people think, oh God, you know, the plantations in the South, like they're like niche wedding destinations and really campy and like terrible. They don't actually talk about. Not this one. This is hang on, I had it. Hang on, let me see here. I think it's called.
Is it like a tourist
I know that
destination?
when I was talking about
Like a
sugarcane,
Disneyland of sadness.
Yeah, they do they tours. Okay, so the Whitney Plantation Historic District. The Whitney Plantation Historic District is a museum 100% devoted to slavery. Like a lot of people on Juneteenth were talking about, why is there no national slavery museum about the horrors of slavery and stuff like that? And the truth is, there are some museums that devote themselves to this. Now, the Whitney Plantation was originally founded in 1752 by German immigrants, which is why that part of Louisiana is called the German Coast. I don't know if this is a plantation that that was part of or in any way affected by the German Coast Uprising, but it was in the general vicinity along the Mississippi rivers where a lot of the sugar was being grown, because it was, not only was it a good climate for it, you had plenty of water, and it was also, the water was the way that you shipped. There was no railroad.
I know that if you got if you got sold to if you were a slave and you got sold to Haiti for their sugar cane, it was so bad.
Yeah,
that
it was like a 7-year life expectancy.
Oh no, it wasn't even 7. It was 3. So you basically your feet hit Haiti. You go into the sugarcane fields because it was just cheaper to replace slaves. You'd be dead, worked to death within 3 years.
Exactly right. Well, anyway, so I'll send Wilder the link so that he can put it in the description. If you want to have an authentic, historically accurate portrayal of what life was like on a plantation in the South for the enslaved, the Whitney Plantation Historic District is your go-to. Number one, they do not allow weddings at their facility. And it's a 2,000-acre property, mostly occupied by a museum, but they also have it's sort of like a mausoleum type sculpture garden dedicated to the slaves that they have researched and figured out, who was who, and, names and things like that, and dedicated it all to them. And a lot of their tour guides either have backgrounds in American history, North American history, or Afro-Caribbean history. Like, for instance, on their website, there was actually, there's a little place where you can, write, leave comments for other people. And this one lady said, our tour guide said she was just finishing her master's degree in the history of the Haitian slave revolt. And, she was so knowledgeable and things like that. But anyway, if you want to know about slavery in the South in a realistic portrayal from serious people who understand that the Civil War was about slavery and that slavery was fucking terrible because it's literally owning other human beings, Whitney Plantation Historic District. I will give Wilda the link so that it can go in the doodly-doo down there. But yeah, so that's everything in the past was terrible. And pardon me.
Everything in the past was terrible, and you should eat the rich in the present. Yeah, I believe that's the takeaway from today's episode.
Exactly. But anyway,
this is great. I like recording these episodes on Sunday morning. It's almost like our hate church, our anger church.
We're gonna change the name of the podcast.
Anger church.
Hate church. All right, guys. Well, I think that's about everything. Anything you want to plug before we go?
Yes. If you would like to support us financially, please buy our books, Dusk Belt 1 and 2. Dusk Belt 1, Give Me Back My Life. Dusk Belt 2, Super Lad. Dusk Belt 3 is coming out sometime in probably Juneteenth 2022. And let's see, that's Wolf and the Ghost, I believe, about a werewolf. Very fun. What else? If you would like to contact us, you can do so at thosemuckrakers@gmail.com. You can send us your own Dear Wesley, and we can read it on the air and tell you how to live your life. You should probably not follow our advice.
Oh, you can also support us by sending $5 green dot cards or bars of gold to our P.O. box, care of Wesley, and he'll get all that sorted out and who gets what. What gold and whatnot. Yeah.
It really, really amuses us supporting us financially by sending bars of gold to Wesley, because that's so inconvenient for him because they're super heavy and it's a huge burden on him. It's really funny. He gets no money from it either. He gets to see us get the money after he sells them for us.
And make sure that all the delivery fees are payable cash on delivery. Okay.
Yes.
Nice.
Yes. Perfect.
All right, guys. Well, happy Father's Day and happy Father's Day. Late Juneteenth.
Yeah, happy belated Juneteenth.